A millionaire CEO saw a little girl mocked for her torn shoes. Then he learned the heartbreaking truth. Rain tapped against the windshield of the black SUV as it pulled up in front of Lincoln Elementary. The sky over Portland hung low and gray, washing the city in a cold drizzle that clung to coats and blurred the edges of car windows. Lucas Grant barely noticed the rain. He was already scanning the sidewalk, fingers tapping absently on the steering wheel as his assistant briefed him through his earpiece. The school's expecting a quick walkthrough of the cafeteria and the new playground equipment. 15 minutes tops, she said. Good, he replied, already adjusting the cuff of his blazer. No photos, no speeches. At 42, Lucas was the face of Granite Co., one of the country's fastest-growing outdoor apparel companies. His name had been on Forbes lists and tech magazines. But if you asked him, he'd say he liked numbers more than people, especially today. He hadn't planned on doing this visit himself, but the board insisted some public goodwill from the top. So he showed up. The school principal, a warm woman in a rain-patterned scarf, greeted him with practiced enthusiasm. He nodded politely, following her through the corridors lined with construction paper art and sticky handprints. It smelled faintly of crayons and cafeteria grease. They reached the cafeteria just as lunch hit full swing. Noise spilled out, first high-pitched laughter, trays clattering, shoes squeaking on linoleum. Inside, dozens of children crowded around small circular tables, their conversations overlapping like radio static. But Lucas didn't look at the murals or the new benches. His eyes locked on a girl sitting alone in the far corner. She couldn't have been older than 5. Her blonde hair was tied into 2 braids, though loose strands clung to her cheeks where the rain hadn't dried. Her yellow dress was too thin for the weather, and her denim jacket hung off her shoulders like a hand-me-down too many sizes big. And then he saw the shoes, or what was left of them, faded pink sneakers, the kind with little stars on the sides, but both toes were split open. Her socks were soaked, and her heels rubbed raw against the back with every small movement. She kept her feet angled inward, like she was trying to hide them. In front of her, a plastic container with one folded slice of bread and a half-empty bottle of water. Lucas stopped walking. The principal's voice faded into a blur. Something slammed into his memory so hard it made his jaw clench. The scratch of duct tape against his own skin. The hiss of whispering behind him in a lunchroom just like this one. Look at those shoes. Why even bother coming to school? The way he'd kept his eyes glued to his tray, his fists clenched, pretending he didn't hear. But he had heard, and he had never forgotten. Now, decades later, standing in a cafeteria with expensive shoes and a $3,000 coat, Lucas felt the same tightness coil in his chest. His fingers curled unconsciously. He could feel the ridges of old tape on his skin again. Phantom pain. It wasn't nostalgia. It was a scar reopening. The sound of laughter cut through again, sharper this time. He followed it to a nearby table of boys, 3rd graders maybe. One of them elbowed another and nodded toward the girl. Bet her mom packs trash on purpose, one snickered. Look at her shoes. My dog's got better, another said through a mouthful of crackers. Lucas didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then suddenly he moved. The principal started to say something, but he was already walking. Past the tables, past the teachers monitoring from the side. All eyes began to turn toward him. He didn't care. Every step felt heavier than the last, like he was walking into a memory. The cafeteria quieted, not fully, but enough. Children fell silent. Forks froze mid-air. Even the boys stopped laughing. He reached her table. She hadn't looked up. She was peeling the crust off her bread, her shoulders hunched, trying to make herself smaller. Lucas set his tray down beside her quietly. Not with a thud, not for drama, gently. Then he crouched beside the bench, lowering himself until his eyes were level with hers. She noticed the movement, glanced sideways, then froze. Her eyes were blue, wide, startled, like a deer who'd just realized it wasn't alone in the woods. Lucas offered a soft smile. No pity, just calm. "Hi," he said, his voice low. "Mind if I sit here?" She blinked, confused. She looked past him, then at the boys, then back. Her mouth opened, then closed. Finally, she gave the smallest shake of her head. "I don't mind," she whispered. He slid onto the bench, careful not to sit too close. Close enough to share the space, but far enough not to crowd her. She looked at him again, eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you the man from the picture?" Lucas blinked. "What picture?" She pointed to the banner taped above the cafeteria door. It read, "Thank you, Granite Foundation," and featured a photo of Lucas with a shovel at a ribbon cutting. He chuckled. "Guilty." She nodded solemnly, then reached for her bread. A few crumbs stuck to her fingers. She didn't say anything else. Lucas didn't push. He just picked up his plastic fork and began poking at the pasta on his tray. He could feel every glance in the room trained on them, teachers pretending not to stare, kids whispering. But none of it mattered, because right now, the only thing that did matter was that this little girl wasn't eating alone anymore. He let a minute pass. Then he said softly, "What's your name?" She looked at him, and for the first time, her lips curled just barely. Maya. The name settled into him like a promise, and Lucas Grant, a man who hadn't cried in 20 years, felt something sharp catch behind his eyes. He didn't know it yet, but the moment she spoke that name, everything in his life quietly shifted. Because Maya wasn't just a child in torn shoes. She was a mirror, and this time, he wasn't going to walk away. The rain had lightened by the time the lunch period ended, but the heaviness inside Lucas hadn't budged. He remained seated at the far table long after the other children had tossed their trays and scattered back to their classrooms. Maya sat beside him, still quiet, her bread half-eaten and the bottle of water now empty. Lucas glanced down at her, not wanting to break the fragile stillness that had settled between them. There was something sacred about it, as though saying the wrong thing might shatter the thin thread that had formed. "You ever grabbed the wrong lunch before?" he asked gently. She looked up, puzzled. "I once grabbed a can of dog food instead of chili when I was your age. Thought it was the pop-top soup kind. Opened it at lunch and everyone saw." He smiled faintly, eyes distant. "Smelled awful. I thought I might disappear." Maya blinked, then let out the tiniest giggle. It was soft. Barely a sound, but enough to send a quiet ripple through Lucas's chest. "You ate dog food?" she asked, eyes wide. "I didn't get that far," he said, chuckling, "but I sure learned to double-check labels after that." Another giggle. She looked down, a small smile tugging at her lips. For a moment, it was just two people sharing an awkward childhood memory. No wealth, no poverty, just the space between them narrowing. But then, as quick as it came, her smile faded. She glanced toward the group of boys at the table across the room. They were gone now, but the echo of their laughter still lingered. Maya tucked her feet beneath the bench. "I don't think they like me," she said, not looking at him. Lucas didn't answer right away. He wanted to say something meaningful. Instead, he asked, "Do you like you?" She tilted her head, confused. He leaned in slightly, voice lower. "Because that's what matters most." Maya didn't respond. Her fingers returned to the crust of her bread, picking at it again, like she wanted to disappear into the rhythm. Lucas watched her for a moment longer, then stood and gathered his tray. She looked up, startled by the movement. "Hey," he said with a reassuring tone. "You done?" She nodded slowly, then slid off the bench, adjusting the straps of her small backpack. The cafeteria had emptied, Just a few teachers lingered near the doors, whispering among themselves. Lucas walked beside Maya as they headed toward the hallway. Outside the glass doors, the sidewalk shimmered with rainwater. Puddles pooled in the uneven concrete, reflecting the gray sky overhead. "I can walk you home," he offered gently. "I've got an umbrella." Maya froze for half a step. She turned her face up to him, hesitant. "Thank you, but my mom says not to bother people." The words hit like a punch to the chest. Not to bother people. She said it with such sincerity, as if it were a truth carved in stone. Lucas felt the sting of it deep in his gut, not from insult, but from recognition. He remembered his own mother saying similar things. Don't ask for help. Don't draw attention. Just make it through. Maya gave him a polite little nod and started down the path, her feet splashing lightly through the puddles. The new rain had soaked through the worn seams of her shoes again. He could see it, dark stains creeping up the sides, water sucking into the fabric. She didn't complain. She just kept walking, backpack bouncing slightly with each step. Lucas stood still for a moment, watching her. He felt a hollow twist in his chest, something like guilt wrapped in helplessness. He could call after her, offer again. But he knew it wouldn't matter. Not today. She'd been taught how to disappear before she even knew how to raise her hand. As she neared the end of the walkway, she stopped suddenly, turned. The hood of her jacket had fallen back, and her braids were damp and messy now, sticking to her cheeks. She looked small against the gray city backdrop. "Thanks for sitting with me," she called out softly. Lucas's throat tightened. He gave a small wave, unable to trust his voice, and then she was gone. Around the corner, swallowed by the street, he didn't move for a long time, even as the school principal approached him again with that professional smile, even as the next item on his schedule buzzed in his pocket. Lucas stayed rooted to the ground. That one sentence, that one look back, it had cracked something open inside him that had been sealed for years. Not pity, not obligation, something else, something harder to explain. A quiet voice inside him that simply said, "Don't let this end here." As he stepped back into the car, the driver asked if they were heading to the office. Lucas didn't respond at first. He stared out the window, watching the rain roll down the glass. Then he reached for his phone. "Get me everything you can find," he said to his assistant on the line. "Lincoln Elementary. Student name, Maya Harper." "Sir?" she asked, confused. "Just do it," he said, his voice quieter now. "And be discreet." Then he ended the call, leaned back in the seat and closed his eyes. Because whether Maya knew it or not, he wasn't going anywhere. The rain hadn't let up by the next morning. In fact, it came down harder, soaking Portland's sidewalks and streaking window panes in long silver trails. Lucas stood in his penthouse kitchen, coffee untouched on the counter, eyes scanning the report his assistant had sent overnight. Maya Harper, age 5. Guardian Rachel Harper. Rachel worked 2 jobs late nights at Stanton's Diner and part-time midday shifts stocking shelves at a local grocery store. Single mother, no extended family listed. Rent past due. A minor injury report noted a workplace accident 6 months ago. A fractured tibia, now healed, but still affecting her mobility. Lucas closed the file, jaw tight. He didn't know what he expected. Maybe that this would be a simple fix. A family just missing a few breaks. But this wasn't a blip. This was survival being stitched together day by day. And Maya Bright. Quiet Maya was carrying the weight of all of it. By noon, Lucas was in the car. He didn't alert anyone. No driver, no assistant. Just him. A beat-up black baseball cap pulled low over his face, and the address listed on Maya's school records. He turned off the main road onto a narrow street in a part of town he hadn't seen in years. The kind of street where weeds burst through sidewalk cracks, where rusted mailboxes leaned like old men too tired to stand straight. He parked across from a low-rise brick apartment complex with peeling paint and a sagging roof. The kind of building that told you exactly how many people were behind on rent without saying a word. Across the street, on the chipped concrete steps, Maya sat alone. She had her backpack hugged to her chest, her braids still slightly damp from the walk home. Her socks, once white, were now gray and sagging around her ankles. She was doodling in a small notebook with a pencil worn down to a stub. Lucas stayed in the car for a moment, watching. She wasn't doing anything dramatic, just being still, quiet, waiting. But something about the image felt heavier than it should have. Then, from around the corner, a city bus rumbled to a stop. The door hissed open, and Rachel stepped off. Lucas watched her before she saw him. She moved with a slight limp, favoring her right leg. Her hair was pulled back tightly, but strands had fallen loose in the wind. Her uniform bore the bright red and white logo of Stanton's Diner, stained faintly on one sleeve. A takeout bag hung from her arm, and a bottle of ibuprofen peeked from her jacket pocket. She looked like someone who had stopped expecting help a long time ago. Maya stood up instantly, the way children do when they're used to keeping pace with exhaustion. Rachel smiled faintly, reached out, and ruffled her daughter's hair. No big embraces, just small, practiced love. Quiet and efficient. Lucas opened the car door and stepped out. He didn't know what he was going to say until Rachel turned and saw him. Her expression shifted instantly, eyes narrowing, shoulders tensing. Protective. She stepped slightly in front of Maya. Lucas lifted a hand casually. "Hi, I know who you are," she said, her voice firm. Not rude, just guarded. "I figured," Lucas said, offering a small smile. "I saw Maya at school yesterday. We had lunch." Rachel's jaw moved, as if chewing on that information. "She said something about that," she replied after a beat. "Said you were nice. Sat with her when no one else would. I hope that was okay." Rachel didn't answer right away. She glanced at Maya, who had now tucked herself behind her mother's hip, peeking around Lucas with wide, curious eyes. "It's not every day someone like you shows up in our neighborhood," Rachel finally said. Lucas nodded, accepting the weight behind the words. "I was in the area." "Right," she said, the edge in her tone barely veiled. He gestured toward the apartment. "May I walk you two up?" Rachel hesitated. Then, with a quiet sigh, she nodded and started toward the door. Maya's hand slipped into hers naturally. Lucas followed a step behind. Inside, the stairwell smelled faintly of mildew and overcooked rice. The carpeting was frayed, the walls stained by years of damp air and neglect. Their unit was on the second floor. Rachel unlocked the door and pushed it open. Lucas caught a glimpse of their world. A small living space, a worn couch with one armrest missing, a folding table with mismatched chairs, a tiny shelf stacked with library books, and a single vase holding paper flowers. There was pride in the way it was kept. Neat, lived in, clean despite the age of everything. Rachel didn't invite him in. She just turned in the doorway and said, "We're fine." It wasn't harsh. It was protective, controlled. The kind of line drawn by someone who had learned that every favor came with a price tag. "I'm sure you are," Lucas said gently. "But if you ever need anything—" "We don't," she cut in. Then softer, "Thank you." "But no," Lucas studied her for a long moment. He admired the way she stood, the way her body blocked Maya like a shield, even though she was limping, even though she looked like she hadn't slept properly in weeks. "I'll let you get some rest," he said finally. Rachel nodded. "Have a good day," Mr. Grant. Maya looked up and gave him a shy little wave. Lucas returned it, a lump forming in his throat again. He turned and walked back down the steps. Outside, the rain had started again, light but steady. He got into the car, wiped a hand down his face, and exhaled slowly. That image of their wet footprints trailing across the cement, the small and the large, side by side, stayed with him long after he pulled away. Those prints would fade, but the need, that wasn't going anywhere. That night, Lucas stared out the window of his penthouse as the city lights flickered far below. He called his assistant. "I want to help them," he said quietly. "But she can't know it's me." 2 days passed before Lucas acted, but not because he had forgotten. On the contrary, Maya's small face and those torn pink sneakers haunted him. Every board meeting felt dimmer, every polished presentation more hollow. He kept replaying the image of her standing in the rain, her socks soaked, her little shoulders carrying more than most adults. Lucas wasn't a man prone to impulsive gestures, but this wasn't a gesture. It was a responsibility he couldn't shake. So he moved carefully, quietly. First, he contacted a real estate investment company his foundation worked with. Through a shell property trust, he arranged for Rachel Harper's outstanding rent to be covered in full and 2 more months prepaid. There would be no direct contact, no signatures, just a generic ledger adjustment, passed off as a local housing grant. "Do not let them trace it back to me," he instructed sharply. "If this comes back on my name, it defeats the point." Next, he made another call, this one to a trusted connection at a children's charity that operated anonymously with Portland Public Schools. He explained what he wanted briefly. A new pair of high-quality sneakers, Maya's size, to be delivered to Lincoln Elementary, with no mention of who sent them. "The tag should say just one thing," Lucas added. "Right. For all the places you'll run to next. That's it. Nothing else." The next morning, he sat in his car outside Lincoln Elementary, parked discreetly across the street, watching through the misted windshield. At 9:07 a.m., a courier dropped off a shoebox-sized package at the school's front office. By 10:12 a.m., he saw Maya skipping down the hallway through the main window, a white box hugged to her chest like treasure. Lucas closed his eyes for a moment and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Inside the classroom, Maya sat at her desk, her hands trembling as she opened the box. A murmur passed through the students near her. First surprise, then curiosity, and then something softer. She pulled back the tissue paper, revealing a pair of lavender-colored running shoes with cloud-soft soles and glittered accents. Her breath caught. She touched them like they might vanish if she wasn't careful. Then, she slipped off her old sneakers and laced the new ones with slow, deliberate care. She didn't smile big. She didn't giggle or squeal. Instead, she just stared down at them with a look that hovered somewhere between disbelief and reverence. A few kids came over. This time, they didn't tease. "That's cool," one said, touching the shoe lightly. "Where'd you get 'em?" Maya shrugged, still blinking. "I don't know." At recess, she ran across the blacktop like she'd never run before. Her feet hit the pavement with freedom, no awkward limp, no shuffling to hide worn soles. Just speed, just wind, just joy. Lucas remained in his car, watching from the distance, unnoticed. And in that moment, watching her spin with her arms wide open, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, stillness inside himself, a kind of peace that didn't come from achievement, but from presence. Later that afternoon, he returned to the school under the pretense of inspecting the playground renovation. The teachers greeted him warmly, and the principal showed him around, but he barely heard a word. Near the end of the tour, a third-grade teacher, Mrs. Keene, pulled him aside. "I don't mean to overstep, Mr. Grant," she said in a hushed voice, "but Maya Harper, I assume you saw her earlier this week?" Lucas nodded carefully. "Yes." She's a sweet child, quiet, resilient. But her mother, Rachel, she's proud, fiercely proud. She doesn't ask for help. If she finds out someone's, well, stepping in, it could backfire. Badly. Lucas tilted his head. Why do you think that is? Mrs. Keene hesitated, then answered, because dignity is sometimes the only thing left when everything else falls apart. Some parents would rather struggle quietly than feel like a charity case. He absorbed that. Of course she was right. He'd seen it in Rachel's eyes, that finely tuned radar for pity, the way she flinched at offers that sounded too close to rescue. I'll keep that in mind, Lucas said finally. As he turned to go, Mrs. Keene added softly, but whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Today was the first time I've seen Maya smile without looking over her shoulder. That evening, back in his apartment, Lucas sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittering below. His dinner sat untouched. He was holding something in his hands, a crayon drawing. The school secretary had slipped it to him during his visit. No explanation, just a wink. Someone left this in the office. Thought maybe you'd want to see it? It was a child's drawing. 3 stick figures, one tall, 2 small. The tallest wore what appeared to be a blue suit and held hands with the little girl in the middle. The girl had pink shoes. Her smile stretched wider than her face. At the bottom, written in blocky purple letters, "Thank you. I feel fast now." Lucas stared at the paper for a long time. Then he folded it carefully, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and whispered to the empty room, "You're welcome, kid." But as the city lights dimmed and the rain picked up again, one question echoed in his mind. How long could he help them without being seen? And could kindness survive without truth? Lucas didn't announce his return to the school. He simply began showing up once a week, then twice, sometimes more. He told the principal it was for oversight on the playground maintenance his foundation had funded. That was true, technically. But the real reason was Maya. He never interrupted her class. He never called attention to her. Most days, he simply lingered during recess or peeked into the library, where the younger children read aloud on beanbags shaped like animals. But every time he spotted Maya braids swinging, knees slightly dirty, shoelaces neatly tied, he felt something settle inside him, something that had always felt just slightly out of place until now. It wasn't just Maya who changed in those weeks. It was Lucas. At first, it showed in the small things, letting his morning meetings run late because he took a detour past the school, turning down travel he would have accepted without question months ago. But then it started seeping deeper. His focus shifted, his priorities bent toward something quieter than profit, something more personal. One Friday afternoon, he arrived just in time to catch the second-grade art class wrapping up. Children filtered out with colorful construction paper in their hands. Maya, as usual, was one of the last to leave. Her head was bent low over her drawing, her tongue peeking out in concentration. Lucas leaned on the doorframe, unnoticed, until she stood and carefully slipped her paper into her backpack. Mrs. Keene smiled when she saw him. "You just missed it," she whispered. "They were drawing places they feel safe." Lucas blinked. Safe? "It's our theme this week. Places with no cracks in the sidewalk," Maya called it. The teacher gave a soft chuckle. "Strangest description I've heard, but oddly beautiful." Something about that phrase burrowed into him. Places with no cracks in the sidewalk. He waited outside, pretending to check messages on his phone until Maya walked past. She spotted him and lit up, not in a wild, excitable way, but in the quiet way of a child who'd learned not to take good things for granted. "Hi," she said, hugging her backpack to her chest. "Hey, Speedy," he replied. "Did you draw something today?" She nodded, eyes shining, then hesitated. "Do you want to see it?" He crouched down beside her. Only if I get the full artist's explanation. Maya unzipped the side pocket and pulled out the paper. It was a watercolor. Not the most detailed, but it had care in every line. A small house with a red roof. A swing hanging from a tree. A garden with giant tulips, so tall they stood higher than the people in the picture. Lucas noticed the sidewalk in the drawing. Smooth. Perfect. No cracks, he murmured. She nodded. Mom said sometimes grown-ups fall through them. Lucas stared at the picture. His chest ached. And this? He pointed to the 3 stick figures. She smiled. That's me. That's Mom. And you. He felt something catch in his throat. Me? She nodded like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I drew it last night. You were in my dream. You made us pancakes, but they looked like socks. Lucas laughed softly. That sounds about right. They stood quietly for a moment, the paper fluttering between them. Then her teacher called her from across the yard, and Maya gave him a quick wave before running off. Her new sneakers kicked up little clouds of dust from the blacktop. Lucas folded the picture, carefully, like something delicate, and slipped it inside his jacket. That night, he placed it on the small table beside his bed right, where his phone usually charged. Around 10 p.m., his phone buzzed. It was from Vanessa, his assistant. Rachel Harper's diner had cut her hours again. The owners were downsizing staff, and Rachel had quietly moved to 2 shifts a week. Supplemental hours at the grocery store weren't covering the gap. No health insurance. No benefits. Rent would fall behind again in less than 30 days. Lucas stood by the window, staring out at the dark skyline. For the first time in his career, the lights of the city didn't make him feel powerful. They felt distant, pointless. He dialed Vanessa. Do you remember that community reinvestment project I mentioned last year? The one about hiring single parents into support roles at the company? Yes, sir. I want it fast-tracked. Create a position something in community engagement. Flexible hours. Health benefits. Don't make it look like a handout. Do you have someone in mind? He paused. Yes, but she can't know it came from me. There was a pause on the other end. Vanessa didn't press further. She understood her boss well enough by now. Lucas ended the call, still gripping Maya's drawing in his hand. Later that week, he dropped off a few art kits to the school. Officially, they were for the classroom. Unofficially, he had remembered Maya tracing flowers in the margins of her old notebook with a pencil barely longer than her pinky finger. The next day, he saw her again, sitting in the school garden during recess, legs crossed, sketchpad open in her lap. She was drawing tulips again, this time in layers of red and gold. There was a piece on her face that he hadn't seen before. Not happiness exactly, something more subtle, more earned. Like a kid who'd stopped holding her breath. Lucas didn't say anything. He just stood quietly at the fence, hands in his coat pockets, watching the girl with the lavender shoes draw a garden where no one fell through the cracks. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Vanessa. The jobs posted. Discreet recruiter contact sent to Rachel Harper. No mention of you. Lucas exhaled slowly, the garden scene still in his view. He didn't know if Rachel would accept, but he knew this. The cracks in the sidewalk were starting to fill. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and overworked grease, the kind of scent that clung to clothes and buried itself deep into the wallpaper. Lucas hadn't stepped into a place like Stanton's in at least 2 decades, but as soon as he walked through the door, it all came flooding back, the dull scrape of stools, the tired smile of a server running on fumes, the sound of coins clinking into a tip jar that never felt full enough. Rachel Harper was behind the counter, a pen tucked behind one ear, her limp more noticeable after a long shift. She wore the same uniform he'd seen her in weeks ago, but her shoulders seemed heavier today, her movements slower. When she saw him, she froze mid-pour, the coffee stream missing the rim of the mug by an inch. Lucas offered a calm nod, sliding into one of the booths. "Afternoon." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "You lost or just craving a grilled cheese and burnt toast?" He smirked. "A little of both." She approached cautiously, towel slung over her shoulder. "You here on business, Mr. Grant?" "Not today." He watched her as she set down the menu more out of habit than necessity, and poured him a cup of coffee. She didn't ask what he wanted. She already knew he wouldn't eat. Lucas nodded toward the quiet end of the diner. "Slow afternoon?" Rachel crossed her arms. "Always is after the lunch rush. Besides, most folks around here can barely afford the specials." A beat of silence passed. He picked up the mug, took a sip. It was terrible, but he didn't flinch. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "You've been hovering around my daughter." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Hovering?" "Playground visits. Art supply donations. I may be tired, but I'm not blind." Lucas didn't try to deny it. "She's a great kid." Rachel's jaw tightened. "That's not the point." "Then what is?" She stared at him hard. "People like you don't just drop into people like us. Not unless you want something. So what is it? Guilt? A headline? A conscience?" He could have taken offense. Instead, he set down his mug slowly and leaned forward. "I know what it's like," he said, his voice quiet. "To be her age. To sit alone with shoes that hurt your feet and pretend they don't. To watch everyone pretend they don't see you." Rachel didn't speak. Her arms loosened slightly at her sides. "I didn't have a lot growing up," Lucas continued. "Single mom, double shifts. We didn't always make rent either." She blinked. That piece of truth seemed to land harder than anything else he'd said. Before she could respond, the door swung open, and Maya came rushing in, breathless, cheeks pink from the chill outside. She was holding a colorful flyer in her hands. "Mom! Look, an art contest," she said, voice brimming with excitement. "Mrs. Keene says the top 3 get their pictures framed in the city library. Can I do it, please?" Rachel took the flyer, scanned it quickly. Her smile faded. "Sweetheart, it says there's a registration fee." Maya's shoulders drooped. "But it's just $20. Rachel handed back the flyer gently. "We'll talk about it later, okay?" Maya didn't argue. She just nodded and slid into the booth beside Lucas, her joy evaporating like steam off a cold plate. Lucas watched her, heart twisting. He didn't say anything in the moment. He didn't have to. That night, he logged into the art contest website anonymously. He paid the fee and added an extra donation to sponsor other students who couldn't afford it. Then he called Vanessa and told her to ensure Maya's entry got submitted through her school with no way to trace it back to him. 1 week later, Lucas sat in the back row of the community auditorium, blending in with the families and volunteers gathered for the contest awards. The walls were lined with children's artwork swirls of color, dreams in crayon and watercolor. Maya's piece was easy to spot. 3 people beneath a tree, tulips blooming at their feet, a house with a red roof in the distance. One of the figures wore a blue coat. Lucas smiled. When Maya's name was called for second place, she froze, eyes wide. Her classmates cheered. Her teacher clapped with both hands. Rachel looked just as stunned. Maya walked up to the stage, clutching her ribbon, scanning the crowd until she spotted him. Lucas, standing near the exit, giving her the quietest thumbs up. Her face lit up. Not just a smile, but something deeper, a sense of being seen. After the ceremony, Lucas stepped outside into the crisp evening air. The sky was awash in that soft golden hue that only happened just before sundown. He was halfway to his car when a voice called behind him. "Wait!" He turned. Rachel stood a few paces back, holding Maya's jacket. "She told me," Rachel said, eyes narrowing. "She doesn't know how the fee got paid, but I do." Lucas held her gaze. "It doesn't matter who paid it. What matters is she got her moment." She stepped closer. Her voice wasn't angry now. It was low, careful, like someone weighing truth against pride. "Why are you doing this for us?" Lucas didn't hesitate. "Because someone should have done it for me, and no one did." For the first time, her expression cracked. Not a full break, but the edges softened. The suspicion in her eyes shifted into something else, something closer to reluctant understanding. "I don't want your pity," she said. "This isn't pity," he replied. "It's respect." Rachel stared at him for a long moment, then nodded, slowly. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." She turned and walked back toward the building, her shoulders a little straighter, her steps a little slower. Like the weight she carried had been shared, just a little. Lucas stood in place, watching her until she disappeared into the glow of the auditorium lights. She hadn't said thank you. She hadn't had to. Because for the first time since it all began, Rachel Harper didn't walk away. The email went out on a quiet Wednesday morning. It looked like any other job listing. Community Outreach Assistant, Granite Co. Foundation. Part-time to start. Flexible hours. Competitive pay. Healthcare benefits. No degree required, just heart, resilience, and strong communication skills. The listing was distributed through a neighborhood employment agency, where Rachel had quietly registered weeks ago. She saw it while checking job postings on her lunch break in the back room of the grocery store. The description was oddly specific, almost like it had been written for her. The hours fit perfectly between Maya's school drop-off and pickup. The duties aligned with the kind of multitasking she'd done for years. The starting salary made her breath catch. Still, she hesitated. Too good to be true, her gut warned. But something inside her had shifted lately. Maybe it was Maya's smile growing more confident. Maybe it was the ribbon still taped to their fridge. Maybe it was the man who kept showing up and then never asking for anything in return. So Rachel applied. The interview happened 2 days later, held in a bright corner office at a Granite Co. satellite branch. No mention of Lucas. No grand gestures. Just a warm, middle-aged woman named Denise, who said she loved Rachel's honesty, her work ethic, her story. "You remind me of my sister," Denise said with a grin. "Smart, gritty, doesn't back down." Rachel didn't quite know what to say to that. When the offer came through that afternoon, she accepted it without fanfare. No celebration. Just a long, shaky exhale and a whispered prayer of thanks as she hugged Maya that night a little longer than usual. Lucas found out through Vanessa. He didn't ask for details. He only asked if Rachel seemed happy. She said it's the first time she hasn't dreaded the morning alarm in a long while, Vanessa told him. That was enough. In the weeks that followed, things didn't magically become perfect. But the air around Rachel and Maya began to feel lighter, warmer. Their apartment, still small, felt fuller somehow. With her new hours, Rachel could finally pick Maya up from school herself. They started having dinner together. Real dinner. Maya's drawings, now brighter, more detailed, began to cover the refrigerator door. And then, one Thursday, Maya showed up at Lucas's office. She didn't knock. She simply slipped past the assistant's desk with a confidence that made everyone pause and opened the door like she belonged there. Lucas looked up from his laptop, startled, then broke into a rare, full smile. "Hey there." Maya held out a piece of paper. It was a drawing again, but different from the others. 3 people standing beneath a tree with fat green leaves. The ground was covered in flowers, tulips, roses, sunflowers, and in the middle was a red house with blue windows. "That's us," she said, pointing. "Me, Mom, you." He took it carefully, the paper still warm from her hands. "You, me, and your mom in a garden?" She shook her head. It's not just a garden. It's ours. That's what I wrote on the back." He flipped it over. Sure enough, in her careful scrawl, "Our home." One day, Lucas felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't realized he was holding. "That's a beautiful dream." "It's not a dream anymore," Maya said. "Mom smiles in the morning now. That means it's real." He cleared his throat, placing the drawing gently on his desk like it was made of glass. "Well, you know, some dreams just take a little time." She looked up at him then, eyes bright. "But not forever, right?" "No," he said softly. "Not forever." That night, Lucas walked them both home after dinner at a small diner near the school. It had become something of a tradition. Thursday nights were theirs. Maya held his hand, swinging it as they walked, her backpack bouncing lightly against her side. Rachel walked a few steps ahead, her pace no longer slowed by pain. She was talking about a community event the foundation was planning. She'd been asked to help organize it. Her cheeks were flushed from the cool air, and Lucas couldn't help but notice the way her laughter came easier now, how the tension around her mouth had faded. They reached the apartment building. Maya started up the steps, then turned and looked back down at Lucas. "Do you think this will last?" she asked. It wasn't a child's question, not really. It came from the same place that made her save slices of bread in her lunchbox, just in case. It was the voice of someone who had learned not to get used to anything good. Lucas looked at her for a long time. Then he crouched down until they were eye to eye. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Rachel, standing just a few feet away, heard him. Her gaze lingered for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them, a quiet acknowledgement that the line between kindness and something more had long since blurred. Later that night, Maya tucked herself into bed with her newest sketchbook beside her. Rachel kissed her forehead and sat on the edge of the mattress. "Did you mean it?" Maya asked, her voice muffled by the blanket. "Mean what, honey?" "That he's part of our home now." Rachel smoothed her daughter's hair and smiled softly. "He already is." And across the city, in a high-rise apartment filled with quiet and glass, Lucas placed Maya's new drawing in a frame right next to the first one she had ever given him. He stared at it for a long while, then whispered aloud to the empty room. "Me too." Spring arrived in Portland gently, with shy sunbeams that filtered through trees still shaking off the chill of winter. The sidewalks outside Lincoln Elementary were scattered with petals, the cherry blossoms giving way to soft greens. The world felt quieter, warmer, not loud like summer, but steady, like something learning to breathe again. Lucas stood beneath the wide oak tree at the edge of the schoolyard, a paper bag in one hand and a folded blanket under his arm. Maya had insisted they have a picnic that day. "You've never had my sandwiches," she told him earlier that week, "so I'm in charge." She arrived shortly after with Rachel, who carried a thermos of lemonade and a knowing smile. Maya ran ahead, her backpack bouncing, and began laying out the blanket with all the authority of a small general. Lucas set the bag down and watched as she carefully unwrapped peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, sliced strawberries, and a lopsided banana muffin she'd baked with her mom the night before. Rachel took a seat across from him on the blanket, folding her legs beneath her, relaxed in a way that would have surprised even herself just months ago. There was a quiet glow to her now, not from makeup or clothes. Those were still simple, practical, The glow came from peace, from stability, from presence. As they ate, Maya told stories about school, her new best friend, a class bunny named Caramel who escaped and hid in the art room for 3 hours. Her words tumbled over one another in a way that only children allow. Lucas and Rachel listened, interrupting only to ask the kind of questions that said, "We're here. We care. Tell us everything." After lunch, Maya stood up and dusted off her knees. "Wait here," she said, darting to her backpack. She returned carrying a rectangular object wrapped in bright blue paper and handed it to Lucas. "For you," she said. "Don't open it until I say." Lucas raised an eyebrow but nodded. Maya stepped back, clasping her hands in front of her. "Okay, now." He unwrapped the paper slowly, revealing a black shadow box frame. Inside, carefully mounted on a cream background, were the torn pink sneakers she used to wear, the ones with the split toes and worn soles. Lucas stared at them, his breath caught. A note was taped to the bottom in Maya's careful handwriting. "So you don't forget how far we came." He didn't speak for a moment. His fingers tightened around the frame, and something rose in his chest on sadness. Gratitude, healing, a softness he didn't know he had left. "These are perfect," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "There's more," Maya added, reaching into her backpack again. This time she pulled out a drawing. It was simpler than some of her others, but no less powerful. 3 figures stood together in the center of a small house. Lucas, Rachel, and Maya. Behind them, a garden full of tulips. Overhead, the sun beamed down. At the bottom, in purple crayon, were the words, "My safe place." Lucas looked up slowly. Rachel's eyes shimmered, though she said nothing. He turned to Maya. "You made this?" She nodded. "It's us. Now, not someday. Now." Lucas reached out and hugged her. Not a brief, polite gesture, but a full, strong embrace. Maya melted into it, arms wrapping tightly around his waist. Rachel watched them, her lips trembling into a smile. When they finally pulled apart, Rachel reached for Lucas's hand. "You didn't just give us help," she said, her voice quiet. "You gave us back our dignity." Lucas blinked. That word again? Dignity, not charity, not rescue. He squeezed her hand. "You never lost it," he replied. "You just needed someone to remind you it was still there." Later, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, casting long golden lines across the sidewalk, the 3 of them began packing up. Maya skipped ahead, twirling her backpack and humming a tune that sounded like spring itself. Lucas and Rachel walked behind her, side by side, the silence between them warm and easy. When they reached the front gate of Maya's school, she turned and looked back, her braids swaying over her shoulder. "Come on," she said, beaming. "We're a team now." Lucas laughed and reached for Rachel's hand. They didn't speak, didn't need to. There was no proposal, no grand declarations, just a knowing glance, a quiet, chosen togetherness. At the corner, Maya paused to tie her shoes, her lavender sneakers still spotless, still full of promise. Lucas watched her, then looked down at the frame he carried under his arm. The old shoes, the broken ones. He glanced at Rachel, and together they watched Maya run ahead toward home. Lucas whispered, "She's not just walking in new shoes. She's walking into a new life." Rachel's hand tightened around his. She smiled softly. "So are you." If this touched your heart, please share your reflections in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this journey. And if you'd like to see more stories of hope and healing, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Then check out our other inspiring tales in the playlist. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.